So this had to go down as one of the most frustrating matches I've had for a long, long time. Really enjoyed the fishing, but oh my god, was it frustrating. And there was not a lot I could do about it. The thumbnail says it all. The intro says it all. I got absolutely mullered by the Seagulls. More on that later. Anyway, we drew peg 23 on Lake 4. Now, when I first started doing my live matches again, earlier on in 2023, I kept going on Lake 4 and I really enjoyed it. It was hard fishing. It was just coming at the end of winter. It was very tough fishing, but it was enjoyable. I really like it. It's like a bit of I like it as a bit of a therapy for me, because all my fishing is fishy chuck style fishing. Now, all the venues I go to, you get a bite every single chuck, whether that's Barley Bank, Shearsby Valley, you name it. In the summer, all my fishing is bite chuck fishing. And the reality is, there's a lot of venues, Makins, etc., where you need to be more patient, you need to be a bit more considered in how you fish, you need to be just slower, you need to be more patient, you need to think about how you're going to end up with, where you're going to, you need to think about how you're going to manage your peg, how long you're going to give certain approaches, whether you're going to stick on one thing all day and maybe take 6 or 7 fish, will that be any good? Totally different to how I normally fish. And I think that's important, just to bring me down a peg or two, as in get my brain less engaged, if that makes sense. Not saying you don't need to be engaged with what you're doing, but what I'm saying is I'm not just shipping up to an island and rattling in some pellets and coming back with a fish on. I'm having to really think about what I'm doing to get the best out of my peg. So Lake 4 and Makins in particular on phase 1, because of the size of the fish, is a big, big benefit for me as an angler. It just slows me down. So we drew peg 23 this week, which I've got to be honest, my heart sank when I drew it. It sat back in a little bay. The only good news is that bank had thrown up a few weights 2 weeks previous on a big match. However, it's the shallowest part of the lake. I'm in like a shallow bay there. The wind was off my back, blowing into the other bank. The other bank's the deep bank. Andy Finley was over there. Daz Milne was over there. There was some good anglers over there that do well at the fishery. And I just, when you just sit there and you think, yeah, not really, this isn't the best today. But I don't know Makins that well. And I think that actually comes to help me on this kind of situation, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm still going to catch a couple short, I'm going to catch a couple long. And in the back of my head, because I don't know the venue very well, I still feel like I've got a chance. So I go to the peg quite positive. So my approach for the day was, I had a few different plates spinning really, because my good mate Sam Collett had been on a Silfish festival the week before, and he had said he was hooking loads of carp over his ground bait, fed for skimmers and silvers. Now, sometimes you've got to think, well, I ain't got much information. That was the only information I'd really got on the lake. So I thought, well, maybe I could feed some ground bait somewhere. Maybe catch some skimmers, you never know, but I might even catch some carp. I didn't fancy that peg at all for short pole for carp. So instead, I decided to pick a spot at about 8 metres where I was going to pot in 4 big pots full of ground bait with hardly anything in it, just the odd dead maggot, and then hopefully catch some better silvers, maybe some skimmers, and maybe even some carp over it. I just felt that was my better option than just throwing 8 mils in and not really giving myself a chance. It just didn't look, with the wind off my back, it just never looked like that was ever going to happen with hard pellets. So I felt that the ground bait might just give me a chance, but I must admit that it was looking slim. My other line was 16 metres with a long pole, hard pellets, out and out hard pellets. All my success earlier in the year had come on hard pellets on the long pole, so I was super confident that'd work. And with the wind off my back, I could present it much better than the guys on the other bank. It was just whether there'd be some fish there to catch. My third line was a bomb and pellet. This was 2/3 of the way across towards the rope. There's a rope up and down Lake 4 that stops you casting past halfway. And I felt like because of the wind was off my back, I could keep my feed nice and tight and I might get a big finish on that. The Seagulls proved me wrong. And then I had a Banjo XR feeder, the medium one, set up as a bit of a rover. Now I actually started on the Banjo. I just chucked it up to the rope and just left it, and I sat on my first chuck for about 20 minutes. I'd fed on my pole lines, chucked that out, and I just waited, and I'd not seen a single fish before the start. But past the rope on the other bank where Andy Finlay and the other guys were, you could see them rolling in the wind, which I think they often do on that bank anyway, so it's nothing too much to worry about. But sometimes you've got a fishing match thinking, well, you can't win it, and that was kind of what was in my head. I still approached it positive, but I'm thinking I'm fishing for second or third here. I'm not really fishing to win, because I really fancied Finn over there. He was on the better peg anyway. That peg 9 where he was is the best area. He's so good anyway, and the wind was hacking it. It just looked perfect. So I chucked my banjo to start with. Nothing happened. First chuck, I left it out there. It can be a slow build up on this lake. Left it out there, nothing. Second chuck, I just moved it to my right slightly, searching for fish at this point, searching for indications. Again, nothing. Chucked it out again, a bit more to the left, nothing. And no one's catching anything. The only thing anyone's catching are little F1s on the other bank, and I'm not seeing any carp caught. So I'm in two minds. I'm thinking, do I just stick this out and maybe they'll come, or do I go searching a bit more? I was the end peg on the day, which meant I had the island to chuck to. It was a decent chuck. Now that island can hold a few fish, in my experience, based on the lake that when I've seen it in the cold weather, but not so many. However, it was still quite mild. Storm Kieran actually came the next day after this match, so you can tell a big low was in the air, lots of wind. It was still mild, like stormy conditions, and I felt like maybe there'd be some fish over there. So anyway, I chucked it right up against the island. A beautiful chuck, I've got to say. Even with like a tough wind, like pushing, I was chucking that way, and the wind was sort of catching it, judging it perfect. It was nice, real good cast. The first chuck was right up against the grass, and it didn't take long. It went about 5 or 6 minutes. Round it went. First carp of the day. So with that carp safely in the net, all of a sudden, my interest is a bit like, oh, hang on, if I can catch a few up there. Next chuck, in fact, I got a big drop back, struck into it, and a bit of a scrap, but nothing like it clearly wasn't a carp. Come up with a lovely hybrid, about £2. Beautiful fish. Next chuck, chucked out again. Bream, about £3. I'm like, do you know what? This is all right, this. Chucked it out again, nothing. So I thought, no problem. We'll just have a look on the long pole, see if there's anything there, have a look on the short pole, give the island a rest. Went out on the long pole, nothing. Absolutely nothing. My float maybe gave me a little bit of a wobble, maybe, but I'm really like being optimistic Joe here. Not really. Went on the short pole thinking it's worth a look, see if any skimmers have settled over that ground bait or even any carp. And it was full of little roach and perch. It just, with the wind as it was, it just never looked like that was going to be the best option. In hindsight, I shouldn't have even fed it. I should have read the swim a bit better and looked at the conditions. But I don't know the lake well enough. I was thinking maybe the bream skimmers might be out the wind. But yeah. So back out on the feeder, up against the island. All I'm loading it up with is 2mm fishery pellets, and I've got one of my red 6mm pellets on the hook. And I chucked it up against the island, and the rest did it good, and it went straight round. And this was the pattern really for the rest of the day. I could always get a bite next to the island, but providing I rested it, I'd have to leave it for 20, 25 minutes, do something else, even if it meant not catching anything. I could always go and nick a bite, whether that was a skimmer or a carp. Not big fish, but I was at this point, I've probably got 4 or 5 carp in the net, and no one else is really catching anything. Now this is where my day started to unravel a little bit. Now in my head, I was thinking that the bomb would be my best opportunity to like get a bit of a big finish. By that I mean put together 7 or 8 fish on a line. I always felt like the feeder up against the island was nicking an odd fish as they were coming by. Never felt like I was actually setting the peg up for a big finish. So I've been feeding this bomb from the start, and in my head I wanted to just feed really nicely 2 and 3 pellets all day. But the birds arrived. And when I say the birds, I mean the flock of birds. I mean, look at them birds, they are a joke. Even when I put the long pole line, the ping line, they're even on hook. They're disgusting, them things. Now it started off with 2 or 3, and I was feeding 2 or 3 pellets, and I was maybe getting one taken. You know, a bird had come down and dived for it. But then slowly but surely they got more confident, and every time I picked the catapult up, they'd come up in the air, and then 3 birds turned to 6 birds, and 6 birds turned to 12 birds, and then 12 birds turned to 24 birds, and then 24 birds turned to 36 birds, and it was just like, Oh my god! And there was a spell. I actually took a picture. There was 35 in the shot that I took, and more came after that. So no matter how many pellets I fired in, we're getting absolutely nailed by these bastard birds. I just didn't know what I was doing. I'm feeding. Are any pellets getting to the bottom? I was feeding full pouchfuls of pellets and didn't know whether all of my pellets were getting to the bottom. None of them were getting to the bottom. I assumed not a single pellet was getting to the bottom in hindsight because I fed it most of the day, and even on a bad day at Makins, you would expect to get one, certainly a few liners around your pellets. Nothing. I chucked it out after 3 hours of feeding it. Absolutely, my tip was just motionless, and I'm convinced I'd not even fed the swim. I'd fed it for 3 hours and not even fed the swim. I'd got through a pint of 8 mils, and I'm not convinced any of them had got to the bottom. It was so frustrating, and what was really annoying is the fact that even out there, if I didn't feed out there and just fed my long pole with a catapult, they'd come on that. I'd even decided to ping a few 6 mils up the edge because I thought maybe I could catch one or two up that edge because I had a long bank to my left. If I fed any up there, the seagulls would come there. Basically, all three of my loose fed lines had this swarm of birds on it, and it drove me up the wall. So it really like scuppered my chances. The ground bait had gone. I couldn't even catch a roach or a perch on it now. I topped it up a few times, but it never really happened. Yeah, it was a bit of a waste of time, that was. The long pole never happened. Again, I just don't think the fish were within pole range, certainly where I was. Gazwood to my right, though, had fished like micros and corn and stuff, a bit more positive than ground bait. And he was catching some lovely bream, and I didn't even realise what he was catching. I could just see him catching a few fish and thinking, oh, he's doing all right. But I kind of felt like I was... Finn, by this point, is absolutely emptying it. He's underarming a method into the wind, and he's catching a big carp most chucks in, and he's probably going to end up with over £100 at this point. I'm thinking, well, I can probably get to £50 with a bit of luck in the last hour, maybe 2 or 3 more fish. I didn't even consider what Gaz was catching, and I'm thinking I could just come second here, which would be a result. I'd be well happy with second. So, and my match is unravelling, like I said. I can't get a bite on my bomb, which was my banker. I can't get a bite on a long pole, which is the other line. I fancied either of those to come good. Neither of them I could get a sign on. So the island is literally the only place I can get anything. And it'd gone dead. I think I'd just cast in there too many times. The wind was difficult at this point, so it was taking 2 times to get it into the right place a lot of the time because the wind was catching it. I made a mistake. I was using a 20 gram feeder, needed a 30, didn't have any with me, which is just schoolboy stuff really in there. I had one feeder with me, a 20 gram banjo. Needed a 30 gram or even a 35 gram would have been nice, just to boss the wind a bit because I was chucking across the wind. But I did catch 2 more in that last bit, and then last 20 minutes I think, right, I'm set up for a big finale here, and it just never happened, never moved again. Really frustrating, but I ended up with £53, which was enough for third on the day, and Gazzy's net of fish was unbelievable. He had 37 or nearly £38 of skimmers. They weren't skimmers, they were big old bream. And he had 2 carp as well for £17, which meant he beat me. He had £55, which, fair play to him. I didn't even know he'd caught anything. But saying that, he didn't even realise I'd caught a carp. When I told him I had 8 carp, I could see a bit of shock on his face. But yeah, I never saw him catch, and vice versa, he never saw me catch. So he was second, £55, I had £53, and then Finn absolutely took it clean out. Masterclass in method fishing, £128. It looked to me like he was loose feeding pellets quite heavily on a short, sort of 5 metre line, and then just underarming his method feeder on top of it. I guess it's because the wind was so strong he couldn't get any presentation on the pole. But yeah, just a masterclass from him, and he knows the lake so well. I was chatting to him before the start, and you can just tell his knowledge of the venue is so vast. He knows the nicks and crannies of these swims. He knows where to catch them. He knows the conditions, and it was one of them days where all his expertise came to the fore, and he does ever so well anyway, does Finn. But yeah, you can't give him a peg like that. You just can't. He's too good. So yeah, really enjoyable day. I cannot wait to get back to Makins. It's a real head scratcher at times. I do think on that day I would have been better off fishing bomb and PVA bag up to the rope rather than try to loose feed, because then birds just make it a disaster, almost impossible. So a bomb and PVA would definitely have probably meant I could fish better, but that's for another day. I'm going to get some PVA and get some bags tied up. Yeah, and then that I probably didn't even need to feed my pole swims. I'm not convinced if I'd have fished it like Gaz with micros and corn, I'm not convinced I would have caught many on that. I just think I'm further into the bay where I am, into the shallow water. I'm not sure the bream are there. I mean, they could be, but where Gaz was up on peg 20, that is an area that can, I think he was on 21 actually, to tell a lie, but that is an area I have seen in the 2 visits that I've been before that has thrown up skimmers and stuff on a pole, so there is a chance that that is just a bit more where they live, so, but he did it dead right, fishing micros and corn and stuff, so yeah, really enjoyable day, can't wait to get back, and we'll see you again on the next live match. So don't forget to like and subscribe, we'll see you again very soon.